Hello, everybody. My name is Rosie, and welcome to Turn on the AC, a podcast where we highlight Asian Christian creatives navigating their life in today's modern society. We pray that each conversation and episode helps you create community, inspire, challenge, and encourage whatever stage of life and season you're in. So join us for today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn on the AC. Today, I am super excited to introduce Pauline Zoe Park. She's a soul, pop, R&B singer, songwriter, producer, and a speaker currently based in LA. She has a passion to be a voice of healing in this generation and to break the boundaries that define Christian music. Pauline's original song, Sunflowers and Changing, has touched the hearts of hundreds of thousands of people around the world and has gained millions of streams that have become an anthem of God's breakthrough and freedom. So, through many forms of expression and testimony, including music, writing, and speaking, Pauline seeks to live and pioneer what looks like to be an excellent, bold, and authentic Jesus follower in this generation. So, Pauline, thank you so much for being here today and for taking the time to join us on Turn on the AC.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here, Rosie. I'm excited.
Of course, so I have a confession to make.
Yeah.
I love your music. I listened to your music,
Oh.
even before I asked you to be on this podcast.
Uh-huh.
It, like, popped up on a Spotify shuffle playlist for me,
Oh, no way.
and yeah, I was like, "This is such a vibe, I love this song," and the more I listened to it, I was like, "Okay, this has to be about Jesus." Like, the lyrics are just I'm like, "It's definitely not about a boy, for sure." Um, and, I was like, "It would be so
Aw.
cool to have her be on this podcast." So grateful that you said yes to being here.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. It's always so encouraging whenever I hear, stories and people sharing like this. So, yeah, I'm honored.
Oh, thank you so well, again, I can't, like, stop saying thank you, but, so, I want this, to be a little bit more interactive for season 2, and so I want to ask if you can show and tell us one thing that means a lot to you and why.
Yeah, okay. So I thought about this and I realized I don't have that many items that I care too much about other than the obvious like musical instruments, but I prepared like I don't know if it counts because it's not just one item, but it's a stack of my journals. Ta-da!
Oh my gosh!
Oh my gosh, this is so heavy. I don't know how long I can hold this for, but I wanted to show this because obviously there's a lot. And for me, it means a lot to me because it kind of signifies, I guess, my history with God and I guess all the seasons that I went through, all the ups and downs and all the pains and all of the revelations. And I tend to have notebooks where journals where I put everything in it and I don't like separate it all out. So all of my songs and poems and like doodles and everything, like seasons of my soul. They're all kind of in here, and a lot of the intimacy, like intimate seasons I had with Jesus are like stored in these journals. So yeah, that's my little show and tell.
I love that. How long have you been journaling?
I I always loved writing, but I think I started faithfully kind of consistently journaling in college, I think my freshman year of college, and since then it's kind of been consistent. And this isn't even the full stack. There's more. So but yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love how they're all colored,
Yeah.
and I feel like I really love seeing what different people show and tell because it really just shows their passions and also, like, what means a lot to them and the way that they speak about the items, like, you can see the light in
Mhm.
their eyes, like, I loved seeing your journals because it shows a little bit of who you are.
Definitely.
So currently in this season of your life, how has God been present in your life recently? And I asked this question because the theme for season 2 is being present. And so
Mm,
I really wanted to see how God is being present in your life.
mhm. Yeah, this really made me think. I think one big way that God is really being present for me is he's giving me a lot of new boldness and courage, I think, to take steps of faith that I wasn't able to before. and a lot of it comes out of a long wrestling time, um, wrestling to surrender, a lot of fear, and a lot of like self doubt, and um, just a lot of things. Maybe we'll go more into it later on, but yeah, I think recently he's been just giving me extra grace to not have self doubt and to not have to know like the full picture of how everything's going to play out, um, which I always want, and still giving me the grace to be faithful, take steps of faith, not knowing where it's going to end up, you know. Um, yeah, so that's one big way. And then also just giving me a lot of creativity, I think, recently. So that's something I'm really excited about because, yeah, new songs.
Yeah, no, I love that. Being bold and um, allowing to wrestle with God. I love that. I heard a recent preaching, and so he was like, "Yeah, God allows us to wrestle with Him," and
Totally.
I was like, "Whoa, I love that."
Yeah.
'Cause before I was like, "Okay, God, I would just, kinda do whatever you want me to do," and of course we should, but allowing to be wrestled is like, you know, having those doubts, wondering like, "What are you doing, God, in my life? Is this the right way to go?" And then, like, struggling with that, but then but God is so gracious in who He is. He's like, "I'll let
Hmm.
you ask these questions,
Hmm.
and I'll let you wonder, and I'll let you figure these things out."
I totally agree. When I look back on the past year, especially year and a half, I'm so thankful to God because He gave me so much time to come around to what He has been putting on my heart and calling me to do. And I think I took so long to embrace a lot of things that He was telling me. And when I look back, I see how patient He was and how much He just let me take my time and wrestle and say no and hold on to things. So that's totally true.
I love that. And as we, dive into how God has kind of like revealed and was patient with you, can you briefly tell us how you found Jesus and how he's been guiding you through this like creative journey?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a Christian family, going to church, but I moved around a lot because my parents were actually, um, they were church planters, kind of really involved in missions and ministry when I was young. And so we moved around a lot from both coasts of the US, East, West Coast, NorCal, SoCal. I moved to Korea when I was young and then moved around a lot there. And then I moved to England and moved back to the US. And then I moved back to the UK and I came back to the US. So a lot of that, I wasn't involved in a Christian, like a single Christian church or community. But my parents were Christian and it's kind of how I grew up. When I was 15, my mom signed me up for like a Christian music camp because I always loved singing and I love music. Um, and that was in England. So I went there, and that was when I really met God personally, I think, for the first time. And I struggled a lot with depression and suicidal thoughts when I was young. And I think that camp was really like a turning point for me when I experienced a lot of healing and freedom from that. And that was just intertwined with music from the get-go because it was a music camp. So it was a Christian music camp. So that was when I first experienced God really personally. And then from then on, I experienced a lot of supernatural things, like supernatural answers to prayer and healing and visions and dreams, but I didn't have like a consistent walk with God. And meanwhile, I was like teaching myself the guitar and, you know, learning a lot of pop songs. And I would street perform a lot in England. Um, and yeah, and then when I got to college is when I started to kind of walk more consistently with God and read the Word consistently. I got involved in a on-campus kind of student ministry, and I joined like the worship team, and that's when I started leading worship a lot. And God really started teaching me so much about what it means to worship. I think at the beginning I had no idea. I just like singing. I was like, "Yay, singing and God!" So, but yeah, I started leading worship so much. I would go to different retreats and lead worship. And through that, God was just teaching me and discipling me so much in what true worship really means. And my intimacy with Jesus started just growing during that time too. And then um, in when I was 20, I think, so my junior year of college was when I experienced like this transformative, life changing um, experience of God's grace. And that was when I think, and a few months later, I was baptized in the Holy Spirit. And um, that kind of just like launched me into this new intimacy with God, I think, that I never had before. And out of that is when I started just really, I dove into like the secret place with God. And I would just had this like, crazy honeymoon phase of being in love with Jesus and worshiping. And out of that kind of came my first writing seasons, I think. And it was all worship. So I would write a lot of worship songs, never really having the thought to release it.
I guess I never thought anyone would really care, I guess, or like really want to listen to my own worship songs. But I remember clearly in 2018, I think, the end of 2018, when God started putting on my heart to release my own music, and I had no idea how to do that. I had no resources. I had no sense of anything, no knowledge. So I just said, okay, God, I mean, if you want me to do this, then you have to bring the resources and the people to me. And he did. And that's kind of how I started out. Yeah.
Ah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool how you lived in England, in the UK, and were street performing there.
Yeah.
What is your favorite, like out of all the places you've traveled to, what would you say is your favorite place to be in?
I always get this question, and it's really hard to give an answer because they're so different. Korea, the US, and the UK are different continents. And so everything is different, not just the weather, but the whole culture, the perspectives, worldview, values, um, and education system is completely different. So when from a young age, I think that was really kind of jarring and difficult to adjust to, I think. So my fondness for these places, I think it had to grow over time, because at first, when you're young, moving around, it's not easy. So it's not easy to just think, wow, this is so fun, this is great. But I think now, it's really hard. I don't think I could choose one.
It's okay. You could say all three of them.
Yeah, they're so unique. They're so different. So they each have their strengths.
Yeah, as you're moving around a lot, did you find, or did you have a hard time, like seeing what was home to you, or did you know what home was to you?
Yeah, definitely had a hard time. That was my biggest struggle, I think, although maybe I wasn't fully conscious of it at the time because I was young, but I struggled a lot with my sense of belonging and identity, and it's so tied to where you live and where you're from, and your communities. And if you're always being constantly kind of torn out of your communities, out of your school systems, your friends mean so much at that age. It's difficult for sure. So I think that was a lot of the reason why I had depression, and I had so much like self-hatred and low self-esteem that God really had to heal and do a big work in me, I think. Yeah, so it's definitely hard, but I'm thankful now, of course, always, because I think out of that pain, always God makes something beautiful out of it. And I think a lot of the depth that I feel in my music comes out of that. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
I love that. Turning our messes into messages is what I love to hear.
Yes.
And you also talked about worship and how you found out what worship is. I want to ask you, what does worship mean to you?
Oh. I think worship to me is just one-on-one time with God. It's just your love for Jesus just overflowing out of you. I think that's the best way that I can describe it. Doesn't matter whether it's your song or someone else's song or on stage or in your room. I think it should be the same. And that's where I feel, for me personally, that's where I feel very, very connected with God and with the Holy Spirit, is when I'm worshiping. It's this, I don't know, it's this like feeling that when you're singing and you're pouring out your heart, I just feel like the Holy Spirit is flowing. I don't know how to describe it, but for me, that's what I feel. So it's just my, I guess, like date time with Jesus.
Oh, I love that. That's so sweet. And I'm pretty sure he like loves when we sing to him and when we worship
He
him.
does. He does.
So good, especially with your voice. I'd be like, all right, sing anytime.
No, voice doesn't matter to him. But
You're right. But your voice might be a little bit more precious. I'm just teasing. But so is being a singer, is this a full-time job? Like, is this what you do full-time?
I think that question is always hard for independent artists because it's a complicated answer. It's different if you're signed to a big label and if that's what you want to. So I think for me, I thought about this question a lot, especially when Sunflower started doing really well and I started getting so many messages asking, when is more music coming out? And at the time I was doing a lot of other things and I had no kind of real hope or desire, I guess, to go full-time into it. I never thought of that before. So I think that was one of the big areas of wrestling that I mentioned earlier is, do you want me to do this full-time, God? And do I have the courage to do this? I have no idea what this path looks like because it's not a traditional career path and I'm an independent musician, so you have to do everything yourself, you know? And there's nobody who will tell you this is the next step and these are the steps that you need to take. And so I think that was an area that I had a hard time surrendering to God for a long time. So I wouldn't say that I was full-time until... yeah, it's a hard question. But definitely I was not. All of 2021, which was kind of like my first full year of being in this music, space. I think more recently, who knows what God's plan is, but I think I have given God my yes, if that's what he wants me to do. And I think it's something that it's not like oh, you're hired, and then from the next day you're like working full time. It's, you have to build up things, and it depends on who you're talking to, what kind of duties, responsibilities that are coming up, projects, and so I'm giving God more time, I think, out of my day to do this. And I think if it builds up into a full-time thing, then I'm at a place where I am surrendered and I can just be thankful and dive into it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I love where your heart is at, though. I love that you're just open and willing, and you're like, God, like, I'm available. Like, use me if you're calling me to this. And spending more time with him, I think that's important too, especially because for you, singing and being in the quiet moments is where you spend your time with God. And so I'm excited to see where God takes you, especially if this is going to be like a everyday full-time gig or not. Honestly, it's God is still using you, and I see that clearly, even if this is our first meeting here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. And so, when it comes to writing a song, what is your process?
So usually when I'm writing or I feel inspired, it's when I'm like reading the word or journaling. As you know, I journal a lot. So I think whenever I have time to really stop and take a step back and reflect on my life and the things that God has been doing in my life, that's kind of when I receive a lot of revelations, realizations, and that's when I feel that's what I want to write about. And another thing, like sometimes when I'm reading the word, I feel like there's a certain revelation or a phrase that I feel inspired by. And I want to kind of dig deeper into that area and see kind of what comes out of it. And so usually what I do is I write out whatever it is that I'm feeling. If it's like a feeling that I'm trying to express, I just write it out like a stream of consciousness and just kind of let everything out. And then from there, I kind of try to pick pieces and kind of piece lines together. That's usually my process. And I find it more successful for me when I'm starting with like a lyric or a certain message over like a melody. I think it communicates a more deep message, I think, that I'm going for. So usually that's kind of how my process is. Sometimes in the rare occasions, I feel like God will just speak to me and this something will just be repeating in my head and I have to like write it. So that's also happens once in a while.
Yeah, thank you for taking us through your songwriting process. I think it's cool that you focus in on like, one emotion or like one message that God has been putting on your heart. And then being able to express that through song, I think is a skill and a gift in itself.
Yeah, it's definitely hard because I mean, thankfully I was an English major in college. And yeah, that's something that I didn't understand why I did that when I first graduated, but I think now I'm like, oh God, you knew, you knew. And so I think that really helps. I always loved reading. I loved writing poetry, reading poetry, and I think all of those things are useful now, for sure.
Yeah. How long does it take for you to write a song?
That there's no set like process or structure, I think, because yeah, I mean, sometimes you just don't feel inspired, and sometimes you can be wrestling with a song for like hours and hours, and then the next day you're like, this is so bad. And then sometimes you just are so inspired and you're just writing in one session, like an hour or two, you're done. And so it really depends. But I struggle a lot with finishing songs, and so that's what I'm trying to discipline myself a lot in lately. I think a lot of times songwriting, it's a discipline. I think that's what I'm learning, and I need to grow in it. I need to exercise this area and teach myself how to write consistently, how to finish songs, and that's something that I'm definitely working on right now.
Yeah. So do you have like tons of voice memos in your phone?
Oh yeah,
Just,
yeah. Oh my gosh, they're so disorganized. I think I have hundreds.
That's so cool. I do too. Most of them are
Yeah.
just like, all right, don't forget to do this or something.
Oh really?
Like that.
Reminders to yourself?
Yeah, which is bad because I
That's
don't
so
label them.
Yeah.
So it's just like my address at where I'm at.
I use like the Notes app, and you know how you can do like checklists on the Notes app. My
Yeah.
friends always would make fun of me because they say that I'm always on my phone because I'm on my Notes app. And it's not like I'm doing other things, but I'm always sorting out all my thoughts, everything I need to do just on my notes. So that's like the app I spend the most time on.
You seem like a very organized person, Pauline. I like you.
I'm not. No, I'm just starting to get organized because I realized the need for this. Just for myself, I need it. So if I want to be faithful. So that's what I'm starting to do. Kind of, I'm trying to create like a structure for myself.
Yeah. Well, I love it. Like when I asked you to be on the podcast, you were on it, sis. And I was like,
Was
yes.
I? No,
Yeah.
it depends. It depends with that too. Like things that I want to do, I have no issue with replying, and then there are certain emails I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this. So it takes long.
I'm so glad you wanted to do this then.
Yes, I did.
So, going back to being a singer and a songwriter, what is your favorite thing about being a singer and a songwriter?
Yes, I think this could be common for a lot of artists and singers and songwriters, but first of all, for me, self-expression is a source of healing for me, and it's something that I need to do to live. And I think that's something that I realized when I was taking a break from music is oh, I need to do this so that I can live, kind of thing. And so just the fact that I get to express myself and share my inner thoughts, my inner world, I think, with the world, that in itself, it brings me so much life and so much healing. And then on top of that, the fact that it can bring an impact to other people and be an encouragement, that's just, I can't even express how amazing that feels, I think. Where the things and the struggles that you feel like you were alone in, when you share them, you realize that so many people felt the same way, and you're able to be a source of healing through the struggle that you went through. I think, wow, there's nothing like that to really humble you and to motivate you. And yeah, it really is. That's definitely a huge, huge blessing and motivation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It is definitely, I love listening to a song and like listening to the lyrics and being like, oh my gosh, like that's exactly how I feel.
No, I think that's like a huge passion of mine too. Like of course, there could be moments where you want to put out a song for yourself, like only for yourself. But I always strive to be able to write in a way that can connect and speak to people's like human experience. So definitely, yeah.
You know, earlier in the introduction, we talked about kind of like the boundaries that you're wanting to break from Christian music. So could you explain, you know, what are some of the boundaries that define Christian music that you're trying to break from?
Yeah, I am very passionate about this, so stop me if I go too long. But it's something that I've been unpacking for a while, I think. And I think there needs to be more light shed on this area, because it was something that I took a while to kind of get to a place where I was able to articulate this struggle. And I think for me, being kind of third culture and in being exposed to a lot of different cultures from a young age, I think it was always hard for me to feel at home in a certain specific, like, one culture, I think. And a lot of that is I was deeply involved in a lot of Korean Christian communities, in my college years, and I mean, I guess even now too. And that was something that I realized I wasn't too familiar with when I was younger, because I lived abroad for so long, like in predominantly like Caucasian communities, diverse communities. And so I think CCM music, it derives from, I guess it derives from, sorry if I get too like philosophical on this, but it derives from cultural faith backgrounds, and it derives from a conservative and I guess Caucasian, predominantly conservative Christian background. And so that kind of faith will inevitably come out in the type of music and worship that is being expressed. And a lot of Korean Christian communities are also the CCM that derives out of that is also, from a conservative, I guess, faith background. And so culturally, I think I struggled a lot with being in a Christian community that was, I guess, like spiritually conservative, culturally very conservative, very Korean. And a lot of that kind of frustration, I guess, that I wasn't even conscious of, that I felt like it inhibited my freedom of musical expression a lot. And it was something that I had to realize and consciously try to break out of for my own, I guess, soul well-being and freedom. And so I think I guess I want to, part of it is like an exploration of who I really am, and what makes me really feel like myself and free. What kind of music makes me feel like this is me, you know? And when I started writing in a non-traditional like CCM worship style, in a more pop and soul style and R&B, I think that's where I really found myself more. And I started bringing in musical influences that I listened to when I was younger, and a lot of it is like secular, like pop music, the classics and the greats. And I don't know why like there's such a separation, I guess, between stylistically like these types of music and like Christian music. And so I think my exploration of bringing those things two together was part of me, my own like soul journey of reconciling like different aspects of myself, my identity, my cultural background, my faith background. And so I'm really thankful to be able to be in this space where I can kind of pioneer that and show people like you don't have to be limited by this or that, you know. And I'm a very free spirit. So but yeah, I think that's something that a space I want to continue operating in. And then a part of it also is I want to show that my faith is not just a religion. It's not something that is only applicable in certain areas of my life, but because it's so integrated into who I am, it expresses itself in everything that I do, you know, and it's so fully integrated into myself and into my life. And so I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, but that's kind of that's kind of where I'm at right now.
No, it does make sense. Thank you for sharing about the CC music, right? It's conservative Christian music.
Oh no, CCM is Christian contemporary music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Contemporary Christian music, right?
Contemporary Christian music, or Christian contemporary music. But it's basically referring to like all the traditional kind of worship, I feel like. Worship and Christian, I guess, songs, mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think like defines the contemporary Christian music? Is it the way that the music is played, or the lyrics?
Well, I think like instrumentally, there's a lot of, I don't know, we know like worship, there's a lot of pads and kind of atmospheric electric guitar sounds, and often there's specific chord progressions and chords that you see a lot, and like not a lot of sevenths, not a lot of, you know, jazzy chords, and the acoustic guitar is leading, and there's not a lot of like syncopation or swung beats or, you know, that kind of thing. And then of course certain vocal tones, like a very straight, like maybe these days what's in is like a more airy, like female vocal tone. And I think in those, both of those areas, I felt like there was a part of myself that wasn't being expressed, because I like to sing in a more, I feel like my voice is more soulful, and I want to be able to express that, you know. And yeah, and I think just lyrically too, there are certain phrases and lyrics that I feel like are so overused that they've almost lost the depth of their meaning. And for me, that's really sad. And I want to be able to express my faith and I guess my life, my experience with God in a way that is unique and in a way that still is so real. And I don't want to just throw around certain phrases and like then, yeah. So in that area too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I learned a lot. I was like, okay. When you brought it up, I was like, whoa, I never really thought about
Oh, really?
that. Yeah. So I love that you're passionate about this, because especially if it's something that helps define your music, which I think helps make you different and stand out because it's you.
Sorry, not that I think those things are bad. I just want to make that clear. Like that's there's a huge space for that and a huge need for that. Of course, like we have a need for worship music and we have a need for CCM music. But for me, I had to really go through a time of exploring what I feel like is most me. Of course, I still love worship and I love a lot of CCM songs too. But yeah, I just want to make that clear.
No, yeah, you're good. That makes sense. What
Yeah.
was the moment where you found out that you were more of like a soul and like a pop R&B singer?
I guess when I took out like the faith component of singing, I just had so much fun like singing these songs, like pop songs, soul songs. And I grew up on a lot of like, I don't know, like I really like Ella Fitzgerald. She's like a jazz singer from the 60s. I had a huge jazz phase in high school, and I loved like Joss Stone, and she's like a British soul, old school soul artist, and like PJ Morton and Yeba and like Jackson 5 and people like that. And I think that's what Beyonce, I love singing that kind of music, and that was what I found so fun for me. And so I just wanted to just be able to unite that with like my passion for singing songs about God.
Yeah, I love Yeba. Yeba's so good.
She's crazy.
Yeah. But anyways, besides these really amazing singers, no, I love that. I mean, what really matters too is like you having fun and you being able to express yourself, not only with lyrics, but the way that you sing and the style that you sing. And it's cool seeing that there's so many styles of singing, like country and rap. I remember hearing my first Christian rap song, and I was like, this is it. I'm like, this is it. The beat's there.
Yes.
The feeling's there.
I love it.
So, do you have a favorite song right now that's currently like on replay for you?
I think because I'm in this writing mode right now, I'm listening to so many different types of songs to analyze and study and to get inspiration from. And so I wouldn't say there's one song that I'm like playing on repeat. And this is something that you might hear from other songwriters too, is that because we spend so much time writing songs, it's hard to separate that from just listening to music purely for enjoyment. And of course, that's kind of sad, and I don't want to get to that point. But I think right now, every time I hear a song that I like, I'm like, why is it so good? Like, what about it? The lyrics, like, what about the instrumentation? What about the beat? What, like, who made this? Who wrote this? Who produced? So, yeah. So, but right now, I think I'm definitely in like I want to write a classic sounding love song. That's like my next project. So I like to listen to a lot of those. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like reconnecting with my love for Billy Joel. I know I sound like super old school, but yeah. So
It's cool. We're getting like a sneak peek of Pauline's like
Yes.
new music.
Yes.
An exclusive only on Turn on the AC podcast.
Exactly.
But I think that's so cool that you like study music when you're listening to it, because I've actually never heard that before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I never heard it from. I've only talked to one singer-songwriter.
Okay.
But it's interesting though that you like some people don't listen to music the same way, because like you're saying, like it's so good. How do you get that? What is this? Who's the producer? Who's the writer? What was their process? That's kind of like what I've heard when I was a communications major, but I took film classes.
Okay.
And they're like, yeah, like you're never gonna see films the same way or movies the same way.
It's
You won't
sad.
enjoy it. Yeah. And me, I'm just like, oh. I was like, I like low-key still enjoy like not thinking about the
That's
process.
a good place to be.
But it is, I think that's really interesting though.
Or what helps me is to listen to a type of music that I would never try to make.
Yeah.
So that way I can just separate that out. So
What kind of music would that be for you?
I guess like right now, not that I will never make it, of course, but like just straight up worship music is not where I'm leaning towards right now. So that's where I feel a lot of freedom, where I can just connect freely with God, worship, and enjoy without feeling like this, oh my gosh, how do I make this? Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I was thinking like country music, or maybe like hardcore rock and roll, but
Rock
I was
and
like,
roll.
if you're down to do that, down to listen to that.
Yeah, I haven't really explored hardcore rock and roll yet. Maybe that's an area I will explore.
It's like low key coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to, I know these are not hardcore rock people, but when Billie Eilish came out with Happier Than Ever,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the like end part of that song, I love screaming at the top of my lungs too. And as well as Olivia Rodrigo's song, where she's just like super angsty teenager. I
Yeah.
feel it. I feel it.
It's definitely coming back.
Yeah. So as we're shifting a little bit to, how you write songs, can you also paint us a quick picture of what your environment looks like when you create?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have to be alone, and I have to be. Well, I'm really good at being in my own world and my own zone, and that's something that I have always been told from my family and my parents, that I'm always like in my own world. So I do focus. I can focus well wherever I am for the most part if I get in the zone. But I think I operate best when I'm alone in my room, and it's just quiet as possible. And yeah, I think that's kind of my environment. And I'm like sitting these days. I like to write by like with on the keys, and kind of in a darker environment. I don't know why. I just like that. It feels more private, and I have to be kind of in a very intimate, private space, I think, to let my mind go free. So yeah, I'm usually in my room.
Yeah, that is a good space to be, because I would imagine you wouldn't listen to like instrumental music while you're trying to write a
No,
song.
definitely not, because it'll definitely influence the music that comes out. So yeah, that's a tip that I give people, is like, if you want to make a certain type of music, you need to saturate yourself in that music. That's what you need to be listening to, because that's what comes out naturally when you start writing. So if you start listening to some instrumental stuff, like who knows where that'll take you.
That is true, because I can't sit in my silence. I have to be like, listening to something, or like a podcast or something like that. But it's interesting though, because you're being still in that moment as you're
Yes.
writing, your music. Do you find it easier for you to be still, or harder to like get into that headspace?
Like generally speaking, or nowadays, or
Yeah, it could be generally speaking, like even, when you're by yourself, trying to come back to the word of God, or when you're writing a song.
like being present.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that's a huge struggle, to be honest. I think since a lot of the songs I write come out of that place of intimacy with God, it's really hard to disconnect songwriting from just being in God's presence and receiving from him. And that's something that I really need to grow in, and that's something I'm recognizing that I need to discipline myself more in, where I can just set aside time where I'm just reading the word and just in prayer, and writing is not, I'm not going to do that, And so that is something that I'm working on a lot. A lot of times I try to make a list of things that I need to do beforehand, so that I don't think of things and I have to stop and do it. So I just know that I'm going to come back to it afterwards, and I just set it aside, and then I'm able to focus. Yeah, that's definitely a big struggle.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing. I think it's hard to really like quiet your mind and just focus in on God. Especially like with not wanting to come with all of your problems. Because for me, I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to be quiet. But also I want to fix this.
Totally.
And I want this.
Totally. Yeah, so but the other day I was planning on spending that kind of time with God in the morning, and it didn't go as planned because I had so many things to do, and I had so many just my mind and my heart were so, yeah, so complicated, had so many thoughts. And then later on in the day, as I was trying to write, I just felt like God's presence was just making me stop. And I was able to have that kind of pure kind of moment with God. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Like, I need to really be present with God and give him space in my mind, in my heart, to speak and be in his presence, even if I'm not speaking with him, asking him anything, not even pouring out my heart, but just enjoy his presence. And I really had to check myself after that, to be more intentional.
Yeah, it's beautiful how like the Holy Spirit like
Yeah.
wants to draw near to God,
Yeah.
and he's like, especially when sorry, I'm gonna rephrase that, especially when we're having like this busy day, or we feel like, oh, like I just can't sit down with God. The Holy Spirit's like, hey, like this is the time, like we need to create space for you to get back to who God is calling you to be, to remind us who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I've just been realizing, even as I read the Bible. I'm realizing, okay, stop trying to find answers that will fit into your situation, and try to just like figure out the characteristics of God and who he is. And that
Yeah.
has like helped me so much in my faith, instead of being like, okay, how does this benefit me? It's like, okay, God, who are you? And what
Totally.
does this say about you?
Yeah, that's really, really good. Wow. Yeah. Because oftentimes when we are looking at who he is, that's when all of our questions are answered. It's not like, tell me what to do, and you look in the word for like an answer for what to do. But often, yeah, when we just meditate on and discover more of who he is, that's enough. Like, we don't need those answers to those questions anymore. Yeah, that's so true.
Yes, so good. So I want to talk about the meanings behind your song Sunflower and Changing. What inspired you to write Sunflower and Changing?
Sunflower kind of came out of that whole struggle of discovering who I am and uniting different parts of my identity that I shared earlier, musically and faith-wise and culturally. And so it was actually my first song that I wrote that was not in the worship style. And I was listening to a lot of Wolfpack at the time. I don't know if you know, they're like a funk kind of band. They're really awesome. You should check them out. And I was wrestling with like a lot of the frustrations, I guess, that I felt being in a very conservative Korean Christian environment. And so that, plus like, yeah, just exploring who I am musically. And then I went through a really rough kind of season, where a lot of things I felt like in me had to die. And I'm thankful now that God was bringing me through this kind of death to life season where I surrendered and died to myself in a lot of areas. And during the time where I wrote Sunflowers, when God was starting to breathe new life into me and re-establishing who I am as his daughter. And that phrase of like, you're the sun, that metaphor of you're the sun and I'm your sunflower, I guess that came out of this feeling, this revelation that God gave me, that as his children, we think we want to be so useful to God, but when God sees us, he just delights in who we are and not in what we can do for him. And so I felt like he was telling me that I'm just a flower, and flowers don't really have much usefulness. All they're required to do is just to be there and just to be beautiful. And them just doing that is them fulfilling their purpose. Their whole purpose is just to be pretty, And I feel like God was telling me that is like, you're so dependent on me. All I require you to do is just be who I created you to be. And that is most beautiful to me. And sunflowers, they kind of turn towards the direction of the sun. And it's like a sunflower, so it's like made in the image of the sun, and they're always turning towards the sun, looking upon the sun. And that, I feel like God was telling me that, like, just look at me, just turn your face towards me. You're made in my image. Just be dependent on me for your energy, for your food, for your life, and just let my joy overflow. When you don't feel peace, when you don't feel joy, when you can't find it in yourself to rejoice, just look at me, just depend on me, and let my joy and peace just overflow in you. And that is when you're fulfilling your purpose. And so that came out of that. So it's actually like a really like death to life song that came out of pain. But I think that's why also it has brought so much joy and healing to people, is that it really came out of that kind of struggle. And then changing came out of, after that, I was wrestling a lot with music and my relationship with music and the call that God placed on my life. And just in my career too, because as I shared at the time, I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to, like, if I had the courage to step into music more fully. And just a little bit of context, my extended family and my family, nobody is doing anything artistic or creative, and it's a very, I guess, traditional Korean kind of culture, I guess. So all of my extended family, they're all like doctors, mostly doctors, 95% doctors, all like 20 plus of them. And academia is very strongly stressed. And so I was really wrestling, I guess, with that. And that kind of, that self-doubt with like, God, what do you want me to do with music? And do I have the courage to really do this? And I don't have credibility with them, with the world. Like, what am I doing with my life? And of course it was during the pandemic too, and everybody was kind of questioning like a lot of things career-wise and in their identity. And so it came out of that struggle of like, dang, I'm not this cool, amazing person that I thought I was going to be, that I wanted to be by this time in my life. And man, I'm just feeling disappointed in myself. And yeah, and God was really speaking to me at the time of, again, just look upon the sun. That's like the second verse, like, just look upon me and know that this process of you becoming who I've want you to be, it takes time, and it's not an overnight thing, and you need to learn how to walk faithfully, I guess, and let yourself fully surrender to this molding, refining process that I'm doing in you, because it's not about you, it's about me. Like, that's what God was telling me, and it's about how I want to use you, how I want to meet you. And so I kind of wrote about that struggle, but that song definitely took a long time to write because it was so hard to put that struggle into words. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I am mind blown at now I will listen to the songs in an even more deeper level. Like, I love it though, because I think in this season of our lives, as we're transitioning from like going to college or like high school, and now we're like adulting and being adults, and life is changing, and we're being challenged by society and the church and who everyone is calling us to be.
Yeah.
We're just like, okay, who do I fit in? Like, where do I fit in? Who am I? And for you to write changing, I feel like that hits on so many levels. When I listened to the lyrics, I was like, oh, like, girl, she's talking about me. Like, how does she know?
Yeah. I think everybody can relate to that feeling of, I'm not who I want to be or where I thought I would be, right? Like, by this time. And like that frustration of like, dang, why am I like this? Yeah.
Yeah, so as you talked a little bit about like your family being all doctors, how
Yeah.
how was it like for you to like change that course for your family in the sense?
Man, that was a big struggle. And the reason why I can talk about it right now is because very recently I feel like that struggle was really resolved for me with God, before God, and I think it was something that he had been wanting me to surrender, I think, to him for so long, but I still kept being so affected by it. Because it's hard, so my dad has three older siblings, and all of them are doctors, and they all like married doctors, and then they all have three kids each. And so we have a big extended family, and all of the kids, like, they're my cousins, and they're all kind of around my age or a little bit older. They're all doctors too, like, except for one who's like an engineer at Google. So yeah, so they're all Ivy Leagues, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, um, every single one of them. So it's very, it's not easy, and um, yeah, I think I let that narrative of me not being good enough, and me not being, um, just me having nothing to show for who I am, and um, I let that get to me for so long, and it was something that I didn't even know was really deeply affecting me until, until after a while, um, and I had to get to a point where God was really asking me, like, why do you care so much about being, I guess, respectable, in the eyes of man, and according to the ways of this world, I guess. And I question, like, why do I want so much to have something to show to people and to the world? And it really made me analyze and break down where my real idols were, and where my heart really was. And um, I had to come to a point where I had to just really surrender everything, and tell God, like, even if I have nothing to show for my life, I know that that's not where my identity is, and that's not what God requires of me, to have all these things to show him. And yeah, I had to really commit myself to be a fool to the world, to be a fool before man, before the world, to run after wholeheartedly the things that I know God has called me to do, even if no one else agrees. No one else might think that God is calling me to this, and people might say, laugh at that, because I have big dreams, but I need to say yes to God, and I know that I won't be happy if I'm not saying yes to God wholeheartedly. So if he's calling me to something crazy, to something not logical, to something that requires so much faith, I still want to be able to say yes, and say, yeah, call me a fool, call me crazy, but I can't say no to this. So that was a kind of a recent, more of a recent, I guess, place of surrender that I came to before God. But I found so much more freedom and joy in that, I think, now that I've finally been able to just fully give God my yes. So, yeah.
Thank you for wanting to share. I think that's so important, and for being open about your life, and also for seeing how like God has brought you to this moment.
Totally.
Yeah, but I'm just having so much fun where I'm just like, oh, I just want to ask you all these questions. I know we're at a time crunch, but don't worry. This can go as long as it wants. I made this podcast, so
yeah, you're the boss.
You're right. No, yeah, it's crazy that half of your family is all doctors, which I'm like, whoa. And then you're like, there's one person who's not, because he's an engineer, and I'm like, oh, okay.
I know. Yeah. And I think I didn't share about these things for a long time, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to, and So I would get a lot of questions and about the meaning behind songs and just my life. And I don't think I was ready to share for the longest time because I was still going through it, and it's so vulnerable to share with the whole world. So I think that's why I kind of didn't answer a lot of questions. And but I think now I want to take more steps to be transparent, and who knows who it can encourage too. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's encouraging me. I'm just like, whoa, you're giving life to me today, Pauline.
I'm glad.
As we talk about like not sharing, everything or not being sure of what to share, do you find like the struggle of keeping your life private, but also like wanting to involve people in your process as being like, a social media person who like uses social media to promote your songs or, to show your YouTube videos, things like that? Do you find like trying to find this balance kind of thing is hard?
Totally, it's hard. And I think so that's why for like the whole year after Sunflower was released, my Instagram was private because I genuinely didn't know what my stance was on social media. Do I want to do this? Do I not? And it kind of became slow. It was a process of coming to this place of, okay, maybe I will. And so that's why even when I went more publicly on like social media, I didn't know whether to treat it like, okay, I'm an artist now. And because I'm an independent artist, and it's like a weird process of realizing that, oh, there are strangers who listen to my music and who want to know about me, because before that it was just my friends. So it was hard to know what kind of relationship I had with that. And then on like YouTube and all those things, I think I didn't come to that place of, okay, I want to really be intentional with this. That was very, 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 very recent. So it's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, so with like finally coming a little bit out of that, how do you balance being present, as a creative person? Do you find it challenging to be present in your everyday life?
Yeah, I think it is, because like as a quote public figure, you always have to, you feel this pressure that you need to be updating people constantly on your life so that they continue to like remember you, I guess, during the seasons where you're not releasing music and you're not like putting stuff out there. And before, because I had that struggle, I just was like, whatever, I don't care. And I would just kind of go MIA and do whatever I wanted, because I didn't want to feel that pressure of like, why do I need to be accountable to the world? Let me just be me. But I think I'm trying to, I guess, like find a balance between, okay, this is what I need to be faithful to, and I realize that God wants me to be faithful to it. And so part of being faithful to that is not going MIA and being more transparent, being more open on those platforms, but then also learning when to turn that off as well and be present with my family, because I moved home with the pandemic, and I'm realizing that a lot of the big impact that I want to make, it starts with the person who's sitting in front of you. It starts with one person that you're talking to and who you're spending time with that day. And God was really convicting me of that. Like, you say you want to make an impact and you want to bless those around you, but that's not just the people who are listening to your music who are strangers, but that includes everyone that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, be it your family, be it other creatives, be it whoever it may be. And that's how God's blessing multiplies. And so I'm really trying to be more mindful of that and be more present. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I also struggle with trying to find this balance of like taking pictures, doing videos,
Totally.
or like really just enjoying the moment. Like not everyone needs to see this beautiful sunset that I see, or
Totally.
not everyone needs to see the awesome
Yeah.
food that I'm eating.
Totally. You know what I realized? Like, I try to just like leave my phone somewhere and just like go and spend a huge chunk of time just without my phone. And like, if I'm going, if I'm going to hang out or if I'm, doing something, I just try to just leave it. And then
Yeah.
that really helps because you don't have that option.
That is so good. And then you're like, hey, just send me that picture later. Or just tag me. I'll just repost it,
Yeah.
No,
sure.
I always try to do, well, lately I've been doing a lot of just like social media breaks. So for like a couple of months, I'll just like deactivate my account. And for me, it's my boundary. Like I know other people have limitations and what they can and can't do. I just know like if I delete the app, I'm gonna download it again, and then I'm going to like try to like sneakily, waste my time on social media because now they have the reels on there,
Totally.
which is kind of like TikTok, and you just like scroll, and I'm spending hours watching these videos. But also realizing that I don't have to make content all the time, which is so refreshing. But what would you say is the most challenging thing about what you do?
Wow, that's a big question because I feel like nowadays being a musician and an artist, it involves so many different things. It's not just music, but it's making content. It's like you have a voice now, so what are you gonna say? And so there's a lot of different areas that I feel like we have to be responsible for. The hardest thing, I guess, the hardest thing is separating my identity from what I do, especially because what I do is so intertwined with me and expressing myself, and it is me, and that's part of the huge blessing and a curse. Is like I get to just be me, and I get to express who I am, and that's what I do, But so that's a huge blessing, but on the other hand, it can also get confusing because when you release music and let's say like people don't respond to it, it's hard to separate that from like your own identity, your own self-worth, your own relationship with God, and to feel like I'm still gonna do this, or I still believe God's calling me to this, and I still love this, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the result is. So that is, I'd say that's one of the biggest struggles. Yeah.
And how do you overcome the seasons of doubt when you're wondering if this is for you, what should the next steps be, kind of things?
I think I tend to try to predict the future and plan out my entire life. And I want to know everything that's going to happen before I take one step. So I'm like, God, if I'm going to do this one thing that you're telling me to do, what does that mean for my life? And I think God is teaching me to not have to know my entire blueprint of my life, and that's faith, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know why you want me to do this, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I can still say yes. I can still do it with open hands, and that can look like releasing a song without knowing what the song after that is going to be. People are always asking like, so do you have plans to make an EP? Do you have plans to blah blah blah, to do this, to collab with this person, and I'm like, I mean, that would be good. I don't really know. And part of music is very organic, and it is very go with the flow, and so you have to have faith in God. You have to, at least for me, I'm realizing I need to have a radical trust, a radical dependency, and a trust on God that a lot of people who aren't in the music space, or they may not really fully understand how big that is for me, but it really is huge. I'm truly trying with all of my heart to operate in this radical dependence and radical faith with everything that I do. And another thing that I recently decided to do that I feel like God spoke to me about was a lot of the promises that he's given me, to actually like print them out and to like stick it on my wall, so that I can remind myself, why am I doing this? And remind myself of the promise, remind myself of the call, remind myself of what I really believe in. And so I did that recently. Is like I went through all my journals and the things that I feel like God spoke to me about, and also different encouragements where I feel like people were speaking prophetically about me and my future. And I like printed it all out, and I literally just stuck it on my wall so that when I doubt, I can read it and I can tell myself, this is why I'm doing this. And it's really helped me. Yeah. So I recommend that to everybody who they feel like God has, put a certain call or a certain, desire in their hearts that they can't see the fruit of yet. It really helps.
Well, I'm going to do that after this. I'm going to I need to do that. That's such a good thing because I tend to forget, and I'm just like, man,
we're so forgetful. And when I was doing that whole process of like cutting things out, printing it out, I was so convicted that, God, I'm so sorry. I am so forgetful that he was having to say the same things over and over because I kept forgetting. And so I really don't want to be like that. I don't want to do that to him.
No, that's good. And it's like a vision board,
It is. It is essentially, yeah.
That's great. And I love how you're saying that you're just trusting in God. Like you don't know the next steps, but you're like, God will guide those steps. That's something that God's been teaching me as well, is just like stop holding on to your plans or stop trying to make plans. Because even when he allows me to make my plans, I realize like, oh my gosh, it would have been so much better if I waited or if I was patient and I just let you do what you're doing. And like recently, I moved away from home to another state and I moved to Ohio. And and everyone's like, why would you move to Ohio? And I'm like, nobody dreams of moving to Ohio. God just kind of brought me here and it has to be for a reason and a purpose. And, the next thing they ask is like, okay, well, what's your plan next? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And they're like, how long are you going to stay there? And I'm like, I hope not long, but also I don't know. Like, wherever God takes me, I just want to go where he is.
Yes.
Because I remember being in LA and I wanted to and I visited LA and I was like, oh my gosh, that could be so fun to live here. Like I have my friends here. It'd be cool. I could get jobs, side hustles, things like that. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being in a church and like hearing the Holy Spirit being like, Rosie, like no matter where you go, if I'm not there, it won't matter. And I was like, okay. I'm like, you're probably telling me not to move right now. Which, I know some people are different. Some people just move and like God provides. But for me, I felt like I wanted to be sure that the Father would go with me where I was going. And so after that, I've just learned to like let go of plans or like where you think you'll be, because you always end up in different places, or God always brings you different places.
That just made me, think that like the way we as sons and daughters of God, we don't make decisions according to the ways of this world. And there's in Corinthians, is it in Corinthians? I don't know. In one of the epistles, it talks about how the way people who operate in this world they won't understand because it's discerned according to the Spirit. And we try to discern according to the Spirit, and it's not going to make logical sense. It's not going to make sense to the world. But that's how we operate, because we're not operating, based on human logic, human wisdom. So, yeah. It was not going to make sense, and we have to be okay with that. People aren't going to understand, but
yeah. So encouraged by that, for sure. Whenever I tell that story, I'm like, I hope they don't think I'm crazy. Like,
no, but God's people are crazy.
You're right.
Yeah.
I think if they hang out with us long enough. But we're actually pretty cool. We're cool people.
I swear we're cool. Hang out with us.
Right? Please hang out with me. So besides, being a singer and a songwriter, you also speak and you have a YouTube channel. And I was taking a I saw some of your YouTube videos, was so encouraged by them, by the way. How did you know that you wanted to be a voice of healing for this generation?
Yeah, I think I shared about having a conflict in my heart about my social media and online presence, and so I was still, that was kind of, I guess, my first step of faith, I guess, in choosing to explore this area and see what happens and just try to be obedient, I guess. And I always, not always, but I think for many years, because I went through different things and depression and a lot of struggles, I think, in my personal and family life in college and after that too. There's a lot of pain and a lot of healing that God had to do in me. And so since I guess maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I received this kind of very, very strong desire and call to be a voice of healing, whether it's through my music or through just my testimony speaking and everything. I feel like God just deposited that heart in me and that desire in me, and he brought me through a lot of pain and hardships. I think to be able to be a vessel in that way, and to be able to be a source of healing in the areas where I had to overcome. And I think because I was able to struggle so much and overcome these things, I think it gives me a lot of extra compassion and understanding and I guess spiritual authority to be able to be a vessel, I guess, of healing. So it's something that I've known since 2018, but I had no idea how it would play out. And so when people would ask me, I would say that I want to bring healing through music, through whatever. And people say, okay, so what's your plan? Like you said, and I don't know, but I know that's what I need to do. So yeah, we'll see. I think God is beginning to do a little bit, and hopefully there's a lot more to come in that area.
Yeah, I love that passion. You're like, I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna do it anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I feel like that's one thing that I love seeing in creatives is they don't fear failure or risking things, because they're just like, I'm gonna do it. If I fail, that's okay. I'm gonna try it again or try something else.
Yeah, I think I definitely fear failure a lot, and that does not go well with being a creative person. And so I had to really become more and more okay with it. And I had to consciously, intentionally choose to overcome that and let myself fail and make mistakes. Because you can't be a creative person if you're like that. So I'm not naturally good at that at all, but trying to overcome that more and more, and not take myself so seriously. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if people laugh. It's okay. Everybody has a growing process, and that's necessary.
Right, everyone has the cringy phase.
Yeah, I'm just trusting that. Yeah, I'm gonna look back and cringe, and it's gonna always be like that. Yeah.
No, I love that. Even though you say that you weren't naturally good at it, I don't think anyone's naturally good at failing. But what we can do is, like you said, we can choose to still get back up. And I love this image of being a fallen soldier and then rising up from the ashes and dusting yourself off and going back into what feels like war or a battle. And one thing that I always tell my friends is that we have to learn how to fail well. Because if we don't fail well, we just give up there and we're like, okay, this is it. I'm in a horrible place. God can't use me. But at the same time, if we learn how to fail well, it's just because you failed at this one thing doesn't mean you don't give up. You shouldn't give up. Try again.
Totally. That's my life motto. it's never, never, ever, 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 ever give up. And that's
Yeah.
something that God had to really convict me of. Yeah, never give up. It doesn't matter like how fast you're going. It just matters that you don't stop. Don't give
Yeah.
up. Yeah. Yeah. And that's also a characteristic that is godly, I think. And it reminded me of that verse like in Proverbs, like the righteous fall 7 times and they rise up again. But the wicked, like, they stumble. I don't know the second part, but that really spoke to me. Like, wow, part of growing up as a child of God into full like spiritual maturity is endurance, perseverance. Yeah,
Yes.
huge.
Enduring the race for sure. Because it'd be tough out here. It really
It'd be
do.
tough, girl. It'd be real tough.
Tell me about it. I had like a breakdown at like Target in the planning section. I was like crying.
Oh man, yes. Random breakdowns, I feel.
There's something beautiful about crying, and it heals you.
Yes, I cry almost every day. I think that's healthy for me though. Like, I think people who don't cry that often, it's because they're not in touch with themselves. I think it's
Right?
healthy to cry.
I think so too. I feel like everyone needs to cry and let it out because emotions are something that God has given us, but emotions don't have, like, emotions can't think. So
Yeah.
it has to be that line of, like, yes, I feel these
Totally.
things and they indicate how I'm feeling, but they're not my source. I don't base my actions upon them.
Yes, yes. Like, emotions are a tool that God has given us, but we can't be ruled and reigned over by our emotions, but really, submitting everything under the Holy
Yes.
Spirit. But yeah, they're a good tool.
Yeah, it's so good. It's such a good conversation that we're having, Pauline.
Yeah, I know. I'm really having fun.
Me too. I'm feeling all the love. So, I just want to go back to what are resources that you love learning from and would recommend?
Ooh, okay. So I base this off of the premise that when I'm nourished spiritually, then my creativity just flows. So flows well. So a lot of these resources that I want to share are very like spiritual kind of based. So I'm a huge nerd, and so I love to read. I love to read books about my faith. And I feel like as a creative, you have to know your identity first, and especially as a Christian creative. So these books really helped me answer a lot of questions that I had with God and about just about my faith. So I really love C.S. Lewis. Mere Christianity. I it's not. I know everyone says this, but it's not overrated. I think everyone should read Mere Christianity. For me, it answered a lot of deep philosophical questions that I had about my faith in a really beautiful way. So I would definitely recommend that. And then Henry Nouwen's Life of the Beloved. It talks about how to operate in your belovedness. And yeah, he just gives this amazing metaphor about how just as Jesus like took the bread, he blessed it and he broke it and he gave it. We are chosen, we're blessed, and we need to be broken. And in those wounds, we were broken before God. That becomes our source of healing when we're given to other people to serve. So that's really good. Man, I have so many books. I don't know how many I should be like talking about. Another author, one of my favorite authors is this his name is Derek Prince, and he writes a lot of books on faith, Grace of Yielding, Secrets of a Prayer Warrior, Why Bad Things Happen to God's People. For me, it helped me in a lot of times of struggling, why God could be doing these things. Practicing the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. And a lot of other books. And then other resources, I follow like Christine Kane on Instagram. For me, I think she posts a lot of like prophetic words, and they have been so timely for me. I feel like God really used them to speak to me very directly. and a lot of it was kind of just like in my relationship with music and my calling and everything. So I would say following like people like her, Magnify Studio, I think, on Instagram, and worship blog at worship blog. I know, kind of random, but like those are some accounts that I follow that help me as a Christian, as a creative. Other resources, I guess, just like habits, maybe. Creatively, what I try to do is like, it's something called morning pages. More recently is where I just have a journal and I write like pages of mindless, like whatever I want. And for me, that really helps my creativity to just flow a lot, and it brings up a lot of things that I didn't even know about, I guess, in my heart. Morning pages, and then I guess like creatively, musically speaking, I guess it's more like advice, but like I mentioned before, like listen to the artists that you like the musical sound of, and listen to their influences too. Go back to their roots, you know, and analyze good songs, analyze good writers. And another thing that I really have been benefiting from this mindset is like talk to your friends and don't be afraid to like ask them questions about things. There's always something to learn from everyone. And so I ask a lot of questions to my friends and to just people in general. And don't be afraid to like reach out, connect with people online, like in person. And also the importance of mentorship. Like you need people in your life who can keep you grounded, and people who can help, you know, feed your soul. So be it spiritually, be it musically, career-wise, people who have more experience who can help you to stay on track and keep you in a good place. So yeah, guess those are my recs.
Yeah, so I also have the book Beloved by
Life of the Beloved.
Yes, so good. I remember reading it, and it's a pretty short read as well, if I can remember.
It is, yeah, it is.
And the text is pretty big, so like you could probably get through it in a couple of weeks if you're a slow reader like me.
When I'm into something, I read really fast, so yeah, it shouldn't take too long. I feel like a lot of the books that I mentioned, they're really short, but for me, they were really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I love books. I also have a couple of books here.
Yes, all of my books.
Oh my gosh!
I should show some of them. Like, Life of the Beloved.
Yes. And thanks for sharing about those book recommendations. I think books are always nice to come back to, especially like
for sure
when you can hold them and you write notes and you highlight. You know, when you talk about having a mentor, what are some things that you feel like people should look for in a mentor?
I guess people who remind you of the truths, the fundamental truths that you believe in, your values. So being aligned on certain values, I think, is really important, because they can always help you to remember those things and bring you back on track when you feel like you're straying. And people also who they're not afraid to call you out, you know, if they feel like you're straying, or they, you know, question you. Why do you want to do that? What's your decision? What's your motive behind that decision? What do you think is important, you know? And so those things, and I used to really underestimate the importance of having like career mentors, but I think that's also something that is really helpful, especially in a certain career path that is really intertwined with your identity. It's important to learn from people who also have operated in that space for a long time and have gone through a lot of the struggles that you may have experienced. Like for me, it's other Christian artists and musicians who have been in this space and struggled with these questions for a long time of how do I express myself, but also, you know, please God and live for Him, and also make a living, and these conflicting things. They've been in this space for a long time, and so they inevitably have a lot of wisdom. And I think whenever I've connected with people like that, it's really just brought so much healing to me. and helped me to find a lot of clarity in these struggles. So yeah, and they just have so much wisdom. So yeah, I think those are the things.
Yeah, those are really great things to look for in a mentor for sure. And it's good. I feel like everybody needs a mentor in whatever stage or season of life you're in. Just because it's always good. And it talks about in the Bible too, to find people, a community to keep you accountable, to make sure that you're pointing back to Christ, make sure all of, that you have support. And, we're called to be a body of Christ, and we do different parts, different things, have different gifts, but we all make up one body. So, Pauline, where can we connect and how can we support you?
Ooh, okay. Connect. Well, I'm on Instagram at Pauline Zoe Park, YouTube, Pauline Zoe Park. All the streaming platforms, you can follow me, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube, Pandora, all of the stuff. And hopefully I have a plan to release some merch sometime this year.
Exciting.
So that's an area that I'm nervous about, but we'll see what happens. I want to do that, and so keep an eye out for that and support. Yeah, stream my music, y'all. Don't forget about me while I'm creating, and have some anticipation. I hope to be releasing more stuff this year, so I'm really excited about. And yeah, just also give me some grace. I'm a human being too. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, that's great. Also, everybody, all of the resources and the connections, like Pauline's Instagram and her Spotify, YouTube stuff, will also be linked below in the description, so you guys can easily access those things. I feel like I'm saying that word wrong. We'll pass through it. But you can follow the link real quick if you guys want to connect with Pauline. So, Pauline, last question.
Yeah.
I know, if your younger self met you today, what is something that they would be proud of or excited about when it comes to who you've become?
We touched on this before, but I think I would say I've truly learned what it means to trust and depend on God, and really what it means to walk by faith and not by sight. And I've really experienced what that looks like in my real life, and part of that also is to hope against all hope and just never give up. Never give up. I think I've grown so much in my perseverance and my endurance to have a faith that is unrealistic, not logical, but the kind of faith that God wants us to have. So in that way, I feel like I've become so much more deeply rooted in God and become so much more courageous. And I think that is what I'd be most proud of. Yeah.
I love that. I'm pretty sure younger you would be like, woo, go Pauline.
Yeah. Hope so. I think she would.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she would. I'm proud of you. I'm not even younger you, but I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
No problem. So that is the end of this episode. Again, everyone, please go check out Pauline's Spotify, her YouTube. Don't forget to support her. Again, all of her links will be below. The resources that she listed will also be below. So again, Pauline, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in on this episode of Turn on the AC. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. If you don't already, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and any other platforms you're listening to. You can also find and watch episodes on YouTube at rose.xiong. Don't forget to leave us a comment, rating, or review to let us know that we're doing a good job. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends and family. If you'd like to be supportive of Turn on the AC to help create more episodes for the future, feel free to donate through our Anchor link. You can also follow us on Instagram at the.asiancreatives, where we post sneak peeks of guests, how you can connect with them, and interactive stories. So thank you guys again so much for listening. We'll catch you guys on our next episode. Stay blessed, fam, and keep creating courageously.